Hello everyone, this is Darcinovia here. Originally I wanted to do a live stream talking about this movie. That might be for another day. Anyway, The Rise of Skywalker. If you're expecting an angry rant, you'd be wrong, considering anyone that's still angry at the Star Wars sequels at this point, I question, what the hell were you expecting? The Force Awakens didn't really set up anything of significance, and don't give me that shit. Force Awakens was a great setup movie. Not really. With J.J. Abrams' stupid-ass mystery boxes, it really left nothing to work with The Last Jedi. And yes, you can say that Rian Johnson completely burned what little foundation the Force Awakens built, but that doesn't change the fact that the sequel trilogy is going to go down in history as a trilogy that had many missed opportunities. It's going to go down in history as a trilogy that is divisive. In fact, I would not be surprised if this topic of these films are going to get banned from forums one of these days, because it's that controversial. Now, for all you Last Jedi apologists that were raving and claiming those who hated the movie were the vocal minority, I think you look like complete idiots now. I'm sorry to say it. Considering if the people who hated The Last Jedi were truly the vocal minority, Rian Johnson wouldn't be constantly being shit on left and right in the Rise of Skywalker. I mean, Rise of Skywalker is literally a fuck you to The Last Jedi. And depending on how you look at it, if you hated The Last Jedi with a passion, you may appreciate that. But if you're like me, it's very pretentious at times, and I'll get into detail more later. People say that Force Awakens was a love letter to Star Wars fans, and The Last Jedi was a hate letter to Star Wars fans. What does Rise of Skywalker, what is it? An apology? I guess you could look at it as an apology, but honestly, it's kind of too little too late at this point. I mean, for 2 years straight, people were, called bigots, sexist, and racist for not liking The Last Jedi, even those like myself who aren't any of these things. And unfortunately, these people, the shills, the shill media, and Lucasfilm have made criticism towards the sequels impossible, thanks to reactionary voices like Geeks and Gamers having pretty much a dominant voice when it comes to criticisms on the sequels. Rise of Skywalker, in my opinion, is everything wrong with the sequel trilogy, and it shows there was no plan at all. Palpatine coming back, come on, let's be honest, there was no plan to bring back Palpatine originally. Rian Johnson basically burned everything to the ground. What could J.J. Abrams really work with? He could have gone in an original, route and have Kylo Ren be the endgame villain, but is Kylo Ren really main villain material? No, he isn't. There's nothing in the previous movie, Force Awakens, that set him up as main antagonist material. Snoke was going to be the endgame villain. And there's just too much evidence to back that up, that Palpatine was a last-minute addition to the trilogy. And it just shows. Palpatine's coming back at the very end of the Skywalker saga after being dead in Return of the Jedi doesn't make any sense. And before you bring up the expanded universe, for those who blindly defend these shitty movies, that's irrelevant to this discussion. because even amongst EU fans, Dark Empire is controversial, and it's shitted on by many people who are fans of the EU. So don't get it twisted. There's EU fans that hate the idea of him coming back as well. In fact, there's people in general that think the idea of bringing back Palpatine is nothing more than glorified fan fiction. Now, that's a topic for another day on how Palpatine, how he was handled in Dark Empire versus Rise of Skywalker. That's a different topic. But it's just Palpatine in this movie, he's so cartoony as a character. He feels like a cartoon villain. And the way he goes out like a Power Rangers villain too. I know I'm all over the place with this, but these are just raw thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker, and I feel like Darth Sidious is, him being in this movie was unnecessary, and he was just shoehorned. They would have been better just having an original character than Darth Sidious. It's just stupid. I'm not even going to get started. It's the convoluted bullshit that this creates in the new canon, which, well, not my problem. The new canon's going to have to come up with some convoluted retcons to explain why Palpatine is alive when he should be dead. Well, not my problem. Anyway, now, how did they treat the remaining characters they had left? I think Lando, I don't think they did him dirty like they did the other characters, which, okay, I'm glad Lando at least doesn't die. At least he gets a chance to have a somewhat of a happy ending. But still, Leia, Han, and Luke, my God, their legacy is completely tarnished. And I don't care if Kylo Ren gets redeemed in the end. I think Kylo Ren, his redemption isn't earned. I'll get into that later, honestly. I mean, Luke, what little time he does have in this movie, I do feel like J.J. Abrams is another occasion where J.J. said, "Fuck you, Rian Johnson," when we actually do get to see Luke. And I don't agree with my colleagues on this. I actually think the character that we saw in that scene when he was giving Rey a prep talk, that was Luke Skywalker. It felt like Luke. But the damage has already been done. JJ doing that was too little too late. And unfortunately, well, yeah, Leia, let's see about Leia. I think she should not have been in this movie. I understand they, didn't want her to die off screen, but honestly, her scenes felt so awkward. Like, she felt like one of those NPCs from a video game. I'll talk about the plot later in the movie. In this review, I'm just talking about the characters in general. Speaking of the characters, I actually don't think, Rey and is actually the worst character in this trilogy anymore. Or Kylo Ren. I actually think it's Poe. Finn at this point. But I'll just get into what I think of Poe. Poe, I don't mind him. He's probably the best character of the sequel trilogy of the new characters. But again, he just comes off as a kind of an asshole at times, and I don't know why. Finn, I can't relate to this because I'm not a black man, but seriously, this is embarrassing. The only thing to this character is, Rey. It's like, my God. Finn has to be the most one-dimensional Star Wars character that we've ever seen in the movies. His character doesn't evolve. devolves. It's like that's the only thing to his character is, oh, where's Rey? It's like that's the only thing he fucking thinks, cares about, and it's really fucking tiring at this point. It's like we're the final act of this trilogy, and he still hasn't grown past that shit. I kind of wish Poe and Finn were a gay couple. I'm not joking, because there was more chemistry between them than there was between Rey and Finn. And don't get me started on the cringy thing with Poe having a thing for Rey. It's like, what is so special about this woman? Oh God, such cringe, such cringe, such cringe, such cringe, such cringe. And I'm just going to talk about the character of Rey. This is going to surprise you. I don't think she is nearly as bad in this film like she is in the previous movies of the trilogy. It felt like, to some extent, the criticisms towards the character was taken into heart and, to the best of their abilities, was trying to address the criticism. Rey being a Mary Sue, I felt like there was some attempt to try to rectify that. Rey being overpowered, her being able to do all this crap with no training. It felt like J.J. Abrams listened to the criticisms of Rey, but I feel like this is something that Rian Johnson should have done in The Last Jedi. In fact, Rey's entire character in The Rise of Skywalker is who she should have been in The Last Jedi. She was far more tolerable this time. And she isn't the worst character in this trilogy anymore. Yes, she's still a Mary Sue. Yes, she doesn't really feel that much like a character, but she's more of a character than Finn and Poe are, unfortunately. Kylo Ren, to be honest with you, I don't understand why people think this character is interesting. I actually find him to be... I actually felt like the character in here devolved. Even as much as I don't like The Last Jedi, I felt like Kylo Ren was a more interesting character in The Last Jedi, and I would have rather that J.J. Abrams continued that path with the character with The Last Jedi, despite how much I hate that movie. It's just... I just don't buy Kylo Ren's him being conflicted on the light and the dark side. I just don't buy it. It is not believable. And I felt like, there was some attempt by Rian Johnson's part to make Kylo Ren more interesting of a character, but he failed miserably. He feels less like a character in Rise of Skywalker, in my opinion, than he does in Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It just felt like Rian Johnson did so much damage to what JJ, I use quotations, had in mind, that JJ just didn't know what to do with the character. Honestly, I disagree with Kylo Ren being the best part of this movie, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I think Rey was the best part of this movie. Because unlike the other characters, it feels like she's the only character that kind of goes through an arc, but not really. I know this. It sounds like here's the thing. I don't hate this movie. I'm just dead inside when it comes to this film because it's just. I just don't have strong feelings towards it, one way or the other. If I hate it or I like it, I don't have those strong feelings, but I have to be honest here. Now, the plot in general, there's a lot I can criticize for the plot. One, I think it feels like a video game. The plot, at times, just feels like, hey, here's this one level, and here's another level, and here's another level, and here's another level. It's so atrocious. Like, none of the Star Wars movies prior to this one feel like a video game. And not to mention, the pasting is all over the place for Rise of Skywalker. I mean, my God, the pasting is just so awful. the first half of the movie is exposition. The second half of the movie feels like a speed run of a video game. And the contrived freaking plot conveniences, it's cringy at times. And the movie is just so predictable, too. Like, say what you will about The Last Jedi, at least The Last Jedi was unpredictable. You didn't see some things coming, not to say that it was good or anything. But J.J. Abrams didn't even try to take any chances with this film. It felt like he just wanted to pander to those who hated the Last Jedi. In my opinion, it got to the point where it was really tiresome. It's like the amount of times that they took jabs at The Last Jedi got really annoying after a while. And this is someone that hates The Last Jedi. Like, them mocking the Hodo maneuver. Okay, that was not necessary. Luke admitting what he did was a mistake. Okay, that's him taking a jab at Jake Elliott-Milker. Luke saying to Rey that a Jedi's weapon should be treated with respect. That's also a jab at Rian Johnson. It's like, okay, I understand, J.J. Abrams, you have a problem with Rian Johnson. You hate the fact that he took what you set up and completely burned everything to the ground. But, Jesus, I'll get to this later, but it has got really annoying. And don't get me wrong, I don't like the character of Rose. I forgot this character existed in this movie because how little she's in this film. It's like this movie is so disjointed and disconnected from not only the rest of the Skywalker saga, but even in its own trilogy. I mean, The Force Awakens is worthless because of The Last Jedi. Rise of Skywalker is worthless because of Force Awakens, which also makes The Force Awakens worthless. So the question is, what is the point of watching, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi again? None of them really matter because of Rise of Skywalker. It feels like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson were just having a pissing contest. And I'm not even exaggerating. It feels like they were having a pissing contest. Rian Johnson did not like what J.J. Abrams was doing in The Force Awakens. Jar Jar Abrams hated what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi. And the whole trilogy just feels so disconnected and disjointed from the rest of the saga and each other. It's like, of all the Star Wars trilogies, this one is the most disconnected. In fact, no trilogy in history have I watched feels as disjointed as the sequels. Like I said, The Rise of Skywalker, I feel like, is everything wrong with the Star Wars sequels. If you hated The Force Awakens, you're likely going to hate this movie. If you like The Last Jedi, you're likely going to hate this movie. If you hated both Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, you're likely going to either hate this movie or feel indifferent, which is where I lie. I'm indifferent. It's like this movie, it feels like J.J. Abrams was trying to please everyone and he pleased no one. This is what this movie is like. And I don't care what the Rotten Tomatoes score says. The average person I've talked to regarding Rise of Skywalker are indifferent about the movie or think the movie's okay. It's like, I don't think we should rely completely on Rotten Tomatoes. I think we should talk to real people in the real world of what they thought of the movie. Rise of Skywalker, if you like The Force Awakens, you're likely going to have a good time. But if you liked The Last Jedi, you're going to hate The Force Awakens. Or if you hated both, you may feel somewhere in between, like me. I think the movie... Okay, as for entertainment value, I would watch The Rise of Skywalker over the rest of the movies, in my opinion. I mean, objectively, I think it's the worst of the sequel trilogy, but in terms of enjoyment, if I had to rewatch any of these movies, in the future, I'd only rewatch this one because unlike The Last Jedi, this movie does have some entertaining moments, and there are some, you know, pretty good action scenes. The and they're you could probably, but then again, you could watch those in isolation, like in the future, like on YouTube or on Disney Plus, without actually seeing the whole movie. That's what the skip, features for. It's like, in my opinion, the only thing worth watching is some of the good action scenes in isolation. The lightsaber duel between Rey and Kylo Ren is actually the best of the whole trilogy. I think it's well choreographed and it doesn't feel like a bunch of noobs swinging freaking, sticks this time. But but those are superficial things. I don't care about the story. I don't care about what happens to the characters. The ending to the saga, and I use this word loosely because this is not an ending to the Skywalker saga. No, to me, Return of the Jedi will always be the ending to the Skywalker saga. It will never be this cash grab. Honestly, if you hated the other sequel movies, you're going to hate this one. I only watched this as an obligation. I may end up doing another video on it for a live stream once I get my microphone with my colleagues at State of Star Wars, and then in the future a teardown of the movie once I get to know how the fandom as a whole perceives it. No matter how positive or negative the reception of this movie ultimately gets in the upcoming months, it's not going to change my mind that Rise of Skywalker is another dumpster fire in the sequel trilogy. It's just, in my opinion, I think it's very fitting that it has a shitty ending to a shitty series of movies. Yeah, I'm glad the sequel trilogy is finally over. At last. We could finally put this bullshit behind us. Anyway, if you disagree with me, that's fine. I had to give my honest thoughts. This is Darcenovia, over and out. May the Force be with us all.